Several conservative media outlets are reporting about inner turmoil within the Department of Homeland Security over the tactics ICE agents are using. Conservative commentator Erick Erickson posted on social media, citing multiple conservative news organizations, that Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has essentially marginalized White House border czar Tom Homan and the head of Border Patrol for prioritizing deportations of criminals and gang members. That's because Erickson contends that Noem and DHS senior advisor Corey Lewandowski wanted broad public roundups without prioritizing undocumented immigrants. Quote, they have bypassed Homan and the head of Border Patrol and elevated Greg Bovino because they want the public confrontations and displays.
And those public confrontations and displays, as the Wall Street Journal editorial page says, hurting Republicans. And as the polls show, their approach hurting Donald Trump standing in the polls.
And the conservative Washington Examiner reports DHS and ICE have been under intense pressure from the White House since last January to amp up arrests and deportations of illegal immigrants, including in a tense showdown last May when White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller eviscerated ICE officials in Washington for not hitting Trump's goal of 3,000 arrests per day.
It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen because, well, for the reason that we've been saying for 6 months, 9 months now, and yet they continue trying. They continue putting their hand on the hot stove. They continue having the president's numbers plummet. And in the process, they're now killing Americans in the streets. Let's bring in right now staff writer at The Atlantic, Anne Applebaum. Anne, let me just open up with just a broad question about your reaction, your response, your fears about what we've seen in Minneapolis over the weekend.
I think the really important word to use here is impunity. In other words, the Trump administration appears to have given these masked thugs who are now in the streets of so many American cities a sense that they can do whatever they want and no one can stop them. In other words, they are already now living in a lawless world. They aren't bound by any rules. They aren't bound by any regulations. They don't owe any explanations to anybody. When they kill someone or when they beat someone up, they have the administration immediately backing them up and supporting them. And that is that you have people living outside of the law and able to commit crimes outside the law. That is a classic piece of authoritarianism. That's what you have in societies where there's no rule of law, there are no courts, or where the courts are politicized. And the fact that the administration has allowed that to happen seemingly deliberately means that they have other goals with this deployment of people.
Yep. Robert George wrote this last night. The DHS's decision to whitewash the Renee Good killing, leading to the resignation of an FBI agent trying to investigate the incident, directly led to the killing of Alex Preddy. ICE agents believed there would be no consequences for using extreme force against protesters, and ordinary citizens realized that increased video scrutiny was their main line of defense against violent occupation. And that's just what you said. They are acting with impunity. And as Robert George says, they're acting with impunity because they saw an officer out of danger fire 2 shots into the head of an American citizen a few weeks ago. And the DHS immediately lied about the killing, covered it up, and refused to investigate it. And so, of course, if the ICE agents see that agent can kill an American citizen, why can't they? And we saw the answer this weekend, didn't we?
We did. And that, of course, that awareness of impunity is exactly what makes everyone feel afraid. I saw some testimony, maybe you saw it too, published in the last day, of a woman who had been a witness to the Alex Preddy murder, describing how she saw it and then she left her house because she was afraid that witnesses were being arrested. In other words, you now have this spreading sensation that if those officers are above the law, then anyone can be targeted. And that is what creates fear, a kind of terror, whatever word it is that you want to use. And that feeling is how you get more people to disobey the law. It's how you get people to stay home during elections. It's how you get people to become not citizens, but passive subjects of a regime. This, again, is something we know from the past.
So to Anne's point and to her expertise on autocracy and how it happens, this impunity that she's talking about, these, as some would call, execution-style killings, or at the very least at point-blank range, when both victims had their hands out, they're the eye of the storm. They're getting the attention because it is so gruesome and so shocking what has happened. But across the country, you have many cases happening every day of children being traumatized, even detained, even arrested, families being violently separated, U.S. citizens getting caught up and detained, cars being broken into, rights being violated right and left by ICE, again, pointing to what Anne calls sort of a overall agency to act with impunity.
A feeling of impunity, and what that does is terrorize those that are seeing this unfold in their communities, in their neighborhoods, on their streets, on suburban streets. In America, in 2026, this is what's happening. Show the picture. This is happening in suburban streets in America in 2026. And Anne, that fear that they can act with that impunity, and that the White House, Kristi Noem, and others will immediately lie for them and say things that they know are lies, that the American people know are lies. That not only sends a chilling message to the protesters, but also, as you say, and it sounds like Russia to me, you know much better because you've spent time there, but you commented about this yesterday. Imagine in America in 2026, we're at a place where a witness to that kind of slaughter is afraid to return to the safety of her home because she believes the same ICE agents will come round her up and imprison her so she will not be able to testify against the ICE agent.
No, and the same fear, thanks to social media, thanks to television, thanks to modern communications, the same fear affects people who aren't in Minneapolis, who are in other parts of the country, who have jobs in the federal government, who wonder whether they're allowed to question officialdom. I believe this same kind of fear affects Republican officials. So why doesn't Congress speak out? Why doesn't Congress say obvious things? You know, that the talk of Greenland last week was crazy, or that obviously government officials are lying about the victims of ICE. Why don't they say anything? Because they're afraid. Maybe they're physically afraid. They're afraid of mobs at their homes in their constituencies. Maybe they're also mentally affected by the vision of ICE impunity. And that, remember, this is what is supposed to happen. When you create spectacles of violence, when you dehumanize the victims, blame the victims, when you celebrate the aggression of people who are acting lawlessly, the point of doing that is to make very broad circles of people afraid in order to give you more control, to make sure that you are in charge of what happens next politically. It's profoundly un-American. It's never happened before at the level of the federal government, at least not at this scale. And it's really important that all Americans are aware of it, understand what's happening, and mentally prepare themselves to fight back.
Yeah, to the point of it being un-American, Alex Preddy was practicing his First and Second Amendment rights when he was killed. And there was some pushback from the NRA. There's some pushback from some Republicans. President Trump last night, not fully defending the officer, but at the same time, posting on Truth Social, blaming squarely Democrats, he says, for creating the chaos that led to these two deaths. The Atlantic's Anne Applebaum. Anne, thank you so much. So, Minnesota.